I baked the cake myself. German chocolate. 2 layers. I even used the good vanilla, the one I keep hidden in the back of the pantry for special occasions. I set the table with the blue and white china, the set my mother gave me before she passed. Lit the candles. Put on my softest sweater, the burgundy one that always makes my eyes look less tired. I even curled my hair, first time in months. I checked the time, 4:28. They were due at 5. I put the coffee on just before 5 so it would be fresh. I laid out the gifts I bought for the grandchildren, little puzzles, storybooks, some silly socks. I even picked up a bottle of wine Olivia liked. Not that she ever said thank you, but still. It felt right. At 5:15 I checked my phone, no messages. At 5:30 I texted Ethan, just a little, hey, all okay, with a smiley face. Not angry, not needy, just casual. At 6 the coffee was cold. The cake sat untouched on the counter. The frosting had started to crack. At 6:30 I called, straight to voicemail. I stared at the phone like it might come to life and explain itself. I sat down at the table, all 6 chairs perfectly placed, cloth napkins folded in triangles, the cake in the middle, the candles still unlit. I waited. At 7:10, I blew out the candles that were never lit. Happy birthday to me. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I thought I would. Instead, I cleaned up, wiped down the counters, wrapped the cake in foil, put the gifts back in the closet. The silence was loud, that kind of silence that echoes with all the things you didn't say. I looked at the clock again. 7:44. And I thought, what if I just disappeared? Not in a dramatic way, not in some storm of slammed doors or shouted truths, but quietly. What if I stopped answering? What if I stopped showing up? Would they notice? Would they care? I opened the hall closet and pulled down my suitcase, the same one I took to Ethan's college graduation. It still had the airline tag on the handle. I packed it slowly. Sweater, jeans, toothbrush, the essentials. I left the cake on the counter, let it sit there. Let them walk in tomorrow and see what forgetting looks like. As I locked the front door, I looked back at the empty table, the untouched plates, the unopened wine, and for the first time in years I felt nothing. No pain, no anger, just a soft, strange calm, like the first breath after holding it too long. I used to think being a mother meant being needed, that if I gave enough, time, meals, rides to piano lessons, money when they were short, then one day, maybe, I'd be thanked for it, remembered, seen. But that day never came. Instead, I became the person they called when something broke, when the babysitter cancelled, when their rent was due early. I was never the first choice. Not for dinner, not for help moving, not even for the holidays anymore. I was the backup plan, the safety net they assumed would always catch them, no matter how hard they fell. Ethan used to call me every Sunday. When he moved in with Olivia, those calls dropped to once a month, then once every 2, and then silence. Unless he needed something. He never said it out loud, but the message was always there. You're useful, not important. My daughter Leah, she was sweeter, in the way people are when they want to be polite but not present. She'd send me photos of the kids, blurry ones, rushed, often with, sorry, forgot to send this last week. On Mother's Day, she'd text a heart. No call, no visit. And my ex-husband. Well, John left years ago. Married a woman named Diane who bakes with almond flour and thinks therapy is a lifestyle. I'm not bitter about him. Not anymore. But sometimes I wonder how he managed to start over while I stayed exactly where he left me, holding everything he dropped. I think the worst part wasn't the forgetting. It was the expectation. The way they expected me to be available, to listen, to clean up, to fix. No one asked how I was. No one asked what I wanted. I became the ghost who did laundry, the shadow behind their schedules, the voice they ignored when it didn't say what they wanted to hear. I remember sitting in the car once outside Leah's house after dropping off a casserole she never asked for. I waited in the driveway just for a minute. The kids were inside. The lights were on. I stared at the front door, hoping someone would come out. No one did. That was the first time I realized they only see me when I serve them. And the strange part? I had let it happen. I taught them that I'd always be there, that I didn't need anything, that love was giving and never asking in return. But now I was starting to wonder, what if that wasn't love at all? What if it was just erasure, disguised as devotion? I didn't leave in a whirlwind. There were no slammed doors, no screaming matches, no dramatic declarations, just a quiet zip of a suitcase and the creak of the floorboards beneath my feet. The house didn't even notice. I packed like I was folding someone else's life, one sweater, 2 pairs of jeans, my walking shoes, the soft cotton nightgown I always wore when I couldn't sleep, toothbrush, a paperback I'd been meaning to read for years. I moved slowly, almost reverently, like I was wrapping up a story, not a life. I left the bedroom just as I found it. Pillows fluffed, bedspread smoothed, the same way I used to leave hotel rooms, tidy as if I'd never been there at all. The hardest part was the kitchen. I stood there for a long while, fingers grazing the fridge door. That's where I left the note. Nothing long, just 6 lines, written in my neatest handwriting on the back of a grocery list. I'm fine. I need time. Please don't call. Please don't come looking. This isn't punishment, it's a decision. Mom. I stuck it under a magnet shaped like a sun. Ethan made it in 2nd grade. Yellow paint chipped at the edges. A crooked smile. I looked around one last time. The chair where I used to drink my coffee. The hallway mirror that always caught me from the side, never straight on. The front door scuffed at the bottom from years of shoes kicked off in a hurry. It was all still mine, but none of it felt like me anymore. When I stepped outside, the air hit different. Not cold. Not warm, just open. I didn't go far, just enough. Enough to feel like I existed beyond their maps. The motel I checked into was nothing special. Beige walls, thin towels, a key that still turned in a lock instead of beeping. I didn't mind. The room was clean, the bed firm. And no one there expected anything from me. Not even conversation. I turned off my phone, placed it in the drawer beside the Gideon Bible and shut it like a vault. For the first time in decades, no one knew where I was. And oddly, that didn't scare me. It comforted me. I lay back on the bed staring at the ceiling tiles, little squares that didn't ask questions, and I let the silence press down on me. Not heavy, not suffocating, just present. It was like vanishing but gentler, like the world had paused, just for me and whispered, "You're allowed." The motel smelled like pine cleaner and old carpet, and something else I couldn't name. Regret, maybe, or memory, the kind that lingers in the walls long after the people are gone. Room 6, ground floor, window facing the back lot, where a single flickering lamp buzzed like it was trying to speak. The woman at the front desk didn't ask questions, just slid me a key and said, "It's quiet tonight." I nodded like that was good news, though I wasn't sure yet. The room had everything I needed and nothing I didn't. A bed covered in a stiff floral spread. A TV that hummed even when it was off. A little table, 2 chairs. No art on the walls. Just the emptiness of beige. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, coat still on, purse still in my lap. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. Then again. The sound felt too loud in that tiny room. I didn't look. I didn't want to see Ethan's name. Or Leah's. Or worse, no name at all. Just numbers and questions I wasn't ready to answer. Instead, I put the phone in the nightstand, next to the worn Bible and an old takeout menu for a diner that probably didn't exist anymore. I opened the window a crack. Let the night air in. It smelled like cold pavement and pine needles and rain that hadn't started yet. The silence grew. At home, silence was always interrupted by the dryer buzzing, a door creaking, a neighbour's dog. Here, the silence wasn't filled with anything. It didn't wait for me to speak. It didn't ask why I left. It just was. I lay back, arms folded across my chest like I was waiting for someone to knock and say I'd made a mistake. But no one came. The buzz of my phone started again around 9. 2 messages. Then 3. I didn't open them, because I knew what they'd say. Where are you? Are you okay? This isn't funny, Mom. And maybe one from Leah that would sound like worry but feel like guilt. But I didn't want worry. I wanted quiet. I turned off the bedside light, watched the glow from the street lamp paint slow-moving shadows across the ceiling. And I thought, not for the first time, that maybe stillness was what I'd been starving for all along. Not answers, not applause, not even closure. Just the right to be somewhere without being needed. To be a woman in a motel room that smelled like pine and regret. And finally, nothing else. The first time I sat alone at a diner, I felt like everyone was staring at me, even though no one was. It was one of those small-town places with red vinyl booths and a chalkboard that said, Pie of the Day, Lemon Meringue. I slid into the corner booth, pressed my hands flat on the sticky table and tried not to fidget. A waitress named Judy with kind eyes and tired feet handed me a menu and said, Coffee? I nodded. Yes, please. That was it. No questions, no second glance. Just coffee poured from a heavy glass pot and the kind of silence that didn't demand conversation. I ordered eggs and toast. Simple. Safe. When the plate came, steam curling up from the buttered bread, I stared at it for a second like I had to ask permission. And then I picked up my fork and took the first bite. It was just eggs. But they tasted different. Maybe because they were mine. I didn't rush. I ate slowly, chewing with intention like I hadn't in years. No one talked over me, no one rolled their eyes when I asked for the salt. No one needed me to cut their food or wipe a spill or remind them to eat their greens. It was just me. And it was enough. Later that day, I walked through a park with a coffee in one hand and nothing in the other. No stroller, no bag, no list, just the wind tugging at my coat and the sound of leaves crunching underfoot. I made eye contact with strangers. Some smiled. Some didn't. I smiled anyway. I found a small bookstore tucked between a laundromat and a hardware shop. Inside, it smelled like paper and cinnamon and something warm I couldn't name. I wandered through the aisles with no one hurrying me along, running their mouth, tugging at my sleeve. I picked up a novel I'd once tried to read 15 years ago but never finished because someone had gotten sick or spilled something or needed to be driven somewhere. This time, I bought it. No excuses. Back at the motel, I read 3 chapters in one sitting. No interruptions. I realized then that loneliness and solitude aren't the same thing. Loneliness is a craving. Solitude is a choice. And when you choose it, really choose it, it becomes something else entirely. A space, a breath, a meal you eat alone that doesn't leave you empty but full. Not of food, but of something far rarer. Peace. The DMV smelled like dust and fluorescent lights. Everything echoed. The clicking of keyboards, the low hum of impatient sighs, the soft shuffle of people waiting to be called. I took a number from the little red dispenser. 47. They were on 39. I sat down in the hard plastic chair, clutching the manila envelope that held my documents. Birth certificate, old ID, divorce papers. All of it stacked like proof that I had existed, mostly for others. When the clerk finally called my number, I stood up slowly, like my bones remembered something my heart hadn't caught up to yet. She didn't look at me long, just glanced over the top of her glasses and said, "Name change?" "Yes," I answered. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. She nodded, started typing. "From what to what?" I hesitated for just a second. "From Margaret Ellis," I said, "to Margaret Green, Greene." She raised an eyebrow. "Green, maiden name." I nodded. "Yes." My mother's name. My name. She typed it in, keys clicking like little exclamation points. Reason for the change? I didn't want to say divorce. I didn't want to say abandonment or disillusionment or because no one says my name with love anymore. So I said, I'm going back to who I was before I gave myself away. She paused just for a moment, then nodded slowly like she understood more than her job required her to. We finished the paperwork. She took my picture. I didn't smile, not really, but I looked straight at the camera this time. No tilt, no hesitation, just me. All of me. When she handed me the temporary license, my fingers trembled. Margaret Green, it read. It had been nearly 40 years since anyone called me that. John never did, not even when we first met. It was Maggie back then, soft and casual, and then Mom, over and over until I forgot I ever had a name of my own. But Margaret Green, that name belonged to someone with edges, with voice, with history, not tied to someone else's narrative. I walked out of the DMV holding that little piece of plastic like it was a medal, not because it made me new, but because it made me whole. Outside, the wind blew sharp across the parking lot. Leaves spun in circles near the curb. I looked up at the grey sky and whispered it, just once, so the world could hear. My name is Margaret Green. And for the first time in decades, I didn't say it like a question. I said it like a promise. It started with a yellow legal pad and a hotel pen that barely worked. I didn't plan it. I just sat at the tiny motel desk, staring at the blank page, and before I knew it, I wrote at the top, Dear Ethan. I didn't stop to think. I just let the words spill out. Not carefully, not kindly, just honestly. I told him about the time he forgot my birthday 3 years in a row, and I pretended I didn't notice. I wrote about the night I waited for him to walk through the front door after Olivia had that awful fight with me. How I sat on the edge of my bed with a cup of cold tea, hoping he'd say something, anything. But he didn't. He just turned off the lights and went to bed. I told him how that felt, how it made me disappear, one layer at a time. When the pen ran dry halfway through, I switched to another, then another. I didn't realize how much I had inside me, how many words had been waiting their turn. The next letter was to Leah. Hers was gentler, not because she deserved it more, but because she had always been halfway between noticing and not noticing. I told her how proud I was of her as a mother, and how it broke me that she never once asked how I managed to be one without anyone helping me, that she never wondered if I had dreams, or if I was tired or lonely. I told her I remembered every drawing she brought home from kindergarten, that I kept her first letter to Santa in the same shoebox as my wedding ring. Then I wrote to John. That one burned. I didn't blame him for leaving, but I told him what it cost me to pretend I was fine, that being strong wasn't a choice, it was the only role left in the play after everyone else walked off stage. Each letter poured out like rain, heavy, cleansing, loud inside my own head. I folded them carefully, slid each one into an envelope, wrote their names on the front. But I never sealed them. I never stamped them. I placed them in a drawer in the nightstand next to the remote that barely worked and a half-used notepad with the motel's logo on top. Because those letters weren't meant to arrive anywhere. They were meant to release me. I didn't need them to read what I wrote. I just needed to stop carrying it all alone. I found the library by accident. I wasn't looking for anything, just wandering, trying to stretch the day a little thinner so the nights didn't come so fast. It was tucked between a dry cleaner and an old church, with ivy curling up the stone like it had grown tired and settled in. The sign out front said, Public Library, in faded gold letters. It looked like a place where time slowed down, and for some reason, that felt like a promise I needed. Inside it was warm, not just in temperature, but in feeling. The kind of quiet that invites you in instead of pressing against your chest. I was in the fiction section, tracing the spines of old paperbacks, when I heard him. "That one's good," he said, his voice low but certain, sad but honest. I turned. He was maybe in his 60s, wearing a sweater that looked too soft to be new, glasses, kind eyes. He wasn't smiling exactly, but there was something gentle about the way he stood, like he'd never rush you, no matter how long you took to speak. I looked down at the book in my hand. A Man Called Ove. "I've read it," I said. He tilted his head. "Then you know." I nodded. "It made me cry in public." He chuckled softly. "That's how you know it's good." We didn't exchange names, didn't shake hands, just talked books like that was the only thing that mattered in the world. He asked what else I liked. I told him I used to read more before. He didn't ask what before meant. I was grateful. I asked what he was reading. He pulled a slim novel from under his arm, something by an author I'd never heard of. "It's quiet," he said, "but it lingers." I liked that. Quiet that lingers. It sounded like something I wanted in my life. We sat for a while in a pair of chairs by the window, both of us reading. Not talking. Just existing near one another without the need to fill the space. I didn't tell him about the motel, or the letters, or the birthday cake no one touched. I didn't tell him my name wasn't always Margaret Green. He didn't need to know any of that, not yet. Because for the first time in a long time, someone looked at me without expecting anything. Not a meal, not an apology, not a favor, just a page, a story, a moment shared between strangers, and sometimes that's enough. It started with a simple search. One quiet evening, the motel room too still, the TV murmuring in the background like a voice I couldn't understand. I turned on my phone for the first time in days. Not to call, not to text, just to look. Leah's page was easy to find. It always was. She was the kind of woman who curated her life like a magazine spread. Soft lighting, matching mugs, little feet in new shoes lined up for a photo. Captions filled with grateful hearts and moments that matter. At first, I just scrolled. Birthday parties I wasn't invited to. Vacations I didn't know they'd taken. Family portraits where my absence wasn't even noticeable. She looked happy, radiant even. Smiling beside a husband who once told me I needed to back off and let Leah live her life. But the longer I watched, the more the cracks began to show. One post about transitioning into a new chapter, another about finding strength in unexpected places. No more pictures of him. The husband. No more tags. No more wine night selfies. Just Leah and the kids. And a lot of captions that sounded like armor. I knew that tone. I'd written in it myself, back when John left, and I had to pretend I wasn't unraveling while folding laundry and making dinner for 2 children who didn't know what broken looked like. I clicked through the comments. They told a different story. One from a friend. "Thinking of you. Call if you need anything." Another. "Hang in there. You're stronger than you think." And then I saw it. A fundraiser link. Help Leah and the kids start over. The target was modest, the story vague. A sudden transition, it said. Unexpected changes. Single mom, new apartment. I sat with that for a long time, staring at the screen, thumb hovering over the donate button. I didn't press it. I didn't comment. I didn't share. I didn't text her to say I was proud or sorry or anything in between. Because I had given her everything once. And she never noticed when I stopped having anything left. Now, from a distance, I watched her life bend under the same weight I'd once carried. And maybe that should have broken my heart. But it didn't. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because I finally understood. Some lessons can't be taught by mothers. They have to be lived in silence. And witnessed. From across the screen. It was a Sunday. Late afternoon. I remember the way the sunlight came through the kitchen window, warm and soft, like it didn't know what was about to happen. Olivia was cleaning out the fridge, tossing containers without asking. Ethan stood near the counter, arms folded like a child trying to disappear into a grown man's body. They didn't know I was standing just around the corner. "I can't keep doing this," Olivia snapped. "She's always here, hovering, rearranging things. It's suffocating." Ethan didn't respond at first. I waited. I hoped, foolishly, that he would say something. Something kind. Something like, "She's my mother," or even, "Let's be patient." Instead, he shrugged, and said, "She's your problem now." 3 words. No anger, no hesitation. Just flat casual dismissal. Your problem. Like I was a stain to scrub out. A mess to manage. An obligation passed like a baton. I didn't walk into the room. I didn't confront him. I went upstairs and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall until the daylight shifted into evening. I didn't cry then. I should have. But I didn't want them to hear it. That moment replayed in my head for weeks, months. The way his voice sounded, tired, careless, detached. The way Olivia didn't argue. The way I wasn't even worth defending. I started to believe it, that I was a problem, a burden, unwanted. But here's the thing about memory. It changes when you do. Now, when I replay that scene, I let myself step into it differently. I walk into the kitchen. I look Ethan in the eye, and I say, "I am not a problem. I am a person, and the woman who kept your life stitched together with shaking hands and sleepless nights deserves more than your indifference." In my mind, he tries to speak, but I hold up my hand. "I may have made it too easy for you to forget who I am, but you'll remember now." It's just a scene in my head, a rewrite, a whispered version of what never happened. But even imagined truths carry weight. And this one, it lifted something off my chest. Because sometimes you don't need to be heard by them. Sometimes you just need to hear yourself, finally, clearly, say what should have been said all along. I am not a problem. I am not a burden. I am not her issue. I am Margaret Green. And I do not belong in the corner of anyone's life. It was a flyer pinned to the bulletin board at the library, green paper with a daisy drawn-in marker and a tear-off tab at the bottom that read, "Community garden plots available. No experience needed." I stared at it for a full minute. Something about it felt gentle, unassuming, like a soft invitation from a world that didn't care where I'd been. I tore off the number and called from a payphone outside the laundromat. My voice shook a little when I said, "I'd like to sign up." The woman on the other end was cheerful, told me there was 1 spot left. "A little overgrown, but it's yours if you want it." I said yes. I didn't tell her my full story, just gave her the name I was beginning to wear comfortably, Margaret Green. When I saw the plot for the first time, it was just a patch of forgotten soil behind a row of chain-link fencing, weeds tangled in every corner, the ground hard and stubborn. But there was light, and space, and possibility. I bought gloves from a dollar store, borrowed tools from the shed behind the library. No one asked questions. No one asked anything. Each morning I showed up early, dug deep, pulled weeds like they were old memories, turned the earth like I was rewriting my history 1 shovel at a time. I didn't know much about gardening, but I knew how to tend to things. I planted herbs first, rosemary, basil, mint, small, fragrant things that reminded me I was still capable of growing something that didn't ask me to explain myself. Then came the tomatoes, the lettuce, a row of marigolds along the border because I remembered my mother used to say they kept the bugs away. A few people started to nod when they saw me, other gardeners with dirt under their nails and sun on their backs. We didn't talk much, just shared water and nodded again when the morning work was done. I never mentioned my children, never brought up the house I left, or the birthday cake that sat untouched. In that garden, I wasn't a mother or an ex-wife or anyone's burden. I was just a woman with soil on her hands and sweat on her brow and something quietly blooming beneath her feet. And as the first green shoots pushed up through the earth, I felt something stir in me too. Not quite joy, not yet, but something close. Something like return. The letter came in a plain white envelope, no return address. Just my name, handwritten in a careful looping script I hadn't seen in years. Margaret Green. It startled me, seeing it like that. Not Ellis. Not Mom. Just me. I opened it slowly, half expecting a bill or some generic notice. But inside was a folded sheet of stationery that smelled faintly like lavender. Dear Margaret, it began, I hope this finds you well. I'm not even sure this will reach you. I heard through someone at choir group that you'd stepped away for a while. I didn't want to pry, but I also didn't want to stay silent. My throat tightened before I'd even made it past the second line. It was from Helen. Helen Price. We used to sit beside each other at church every other Sunday, sharing cough drops and complaints about the air conditioning. She'd brought me soup when I had the flu one winter, stayed late after a potluck to help me scrub casseroles off dishes no one claimed. She wasn't my best friend, not even my closest. But she noticed. She noticed I was gone. I miss your voice during hymns, she wrote. I miss the way you always folded the bulletins in half before putting them back. I miss seeing someone who didn't pretend everything was fine just because we were all wearing nice shoes. That line nearly broke me. I read it 3 times. She'd seen me. Even in the smallness of those Sunday moments, she'd seen through the quiet. The letter wasn't long. She didn't ask where I was or why I left. She just said she hoped I was doing something brave, and that if I ever wanted to write back, she'd be waiting. At the bottom she wrote, "You are missed. That matters." I sat with that for a long time, because for so long I had believed I could vanish and no one would flinch, that I could disappear between the cracks and the world would keep spinning without even a tremble. But then came Helen, with her lavender paper and quiet voice, reaching across the distance not to drag me back, but to let me know the space I left behind hadn't sealed shut. Someone had noticed. Someone had wondered. And maybe that meant I hadn't fully disappeared after all. Maybe I had just stepped out of sight long enough to see myself again. The voicemail came in the middle of the night. I had left my phone on by accident. It buzzed on the nightstand just once, then fell quiet again. I didn't recognize the number. No contact name. Just a long string of digits and the word voicemail beneath it. I stared at it for a minute and then, because curiosity still wins sometimes, I pressed play. It was Leah. At first, there was just breathing, shaky, uneven. Then her voice, tight, raw, like it had been holding back too long. "Mom," she said, "I don't even know if you'll listen to this, but I didn't know what else to do." Silence, a sniff, a shaky inhale. I messed everything up. Another silence. Jeremy left. He said I was cold, distracted, that I kept looking over his shoulder like I was waiting for someone else to show up instead. She laughed, once, sharp and bitter. "I think I was. I think I was waiting for you." More breathing, then sobs, real ones, the kind that catch in your chest like broken glass. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I didn't see it. I didn't see you. I thought you'd always be there, just holding things, making everything okay." The words came faster now, poured out. "I told myself you were fine, that you didn't need much, that you were just strong. But I used that as an excuse, didn't I, to not check in, to not show up, to let you disappear right in front of me." I sat there in the dark, listening to my daughter cry like a child through a tiny speaker in a motel room that smelled like dust and distant rain. "I don't care why you left," she whispered. "I just want you to come back. Please." She paused. "I miss you." Then a click. The message ended. I didn't cry. I sat very still, let her words hang in the air, heavy and cracked and too late. And then I pressed delete. Not out of anger, not out of punishment, but because I couldn't carry it, because that message wasn't for me. It was for the woman I used to be, the one who waited for apologies that never came and bent herself in half to keep the peace. I don't wait anymore. And sometimes love means letting someone cry into silence, because silence is the only thing honest enough to answer them. The courtroom was smaller than I imagined. No grand pillars or polished mahogany, just folding chairs, tired linoleum, and a clerk with a coffee stain on her sleeve. I sat on the left side, alone, my purse on my lap, documents neatly stacked inside a worn folder labelled with my new name, Margaret Green. My hands didn't shake. I wasn't angry. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was simply done. Done being the financial cushion, the co-signer, the just-in-case fallback. Done holding together a debt I didn't create, a burden passed to me under the soft threat of, "But you're their mother." I had once believed that love meant sacrifice, that being needed was the same as being valued. That debt was just another form of devotion. But now I saw it clearly. My name was still tied to a credit card Ethan opened in college, a student loan I helped Leah defer just until things get better, a mortgage I didn't live under anymore. Their emergencies had always become mine. Until now. When the judge asked why I filed the petition, I spoke softly but without hesitation. Because I've spent my whole life co-signing, financially, emotionally, spiritually. And I'm no longer willing to be responsible for people who don't see me as someone worth protecting. He nodded. Didn't ask for more. The paperwork was approved. Just like that, my name was mine again. I left the courthouse in the same quiet I'd entered. No applause, no drama. No. Just footsteps echoing down the hall like punctuation marks on the sentence I had finally finished. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. First, a message from Ethan. "Seriously? You're cutting us off?" Then Leah. "Mom, how could you do this to us?" To them. As if I hadn't already done everything to them, and for them, for decades. I didn't reply, because it wasn't mine to explain anymore. I made a simple dinner, roasted vegetables and a glass of wine from a bottle I bought without asking anyone's permission. I lit a candle, not for ambiance, but for peace. And as I sat there in the gentle glow, I realized something that caught me by surprise. Freedom doesn't feel loud. It feels like breathing without checking who's holding the air. It feels like putting down a bag you forgot you were carrying, and no matter how furious they were, no matter what words would come next, I wasn't going back. Not to the debts, not to the guilt, not to the version of me who mistook silence for safety. I went to that courtroom for myself, and that was enough. It was raining that day, the kind of soft, steady rain that doesn't demand an umbrella, just patience. I had gone to the library to return a book, nothing more. I wasn't in the mood for company. I hadn't been for years, if I'm honest. But he was there, Thomas. I learned his name a few visits back when he finally introduced himself over the biography section. Thomas Webb, he'd said, like he didn't expect the name to matter. But it stuck. He was shelving returns when I walked in, hair a little damp, glasses fogging at the edges. He looked up, smiled gently, like he always did, and said, "You again." I shrugged. Nowhere else I'd rather be on a grey day. He set down a book and stepped closer, hesitant but steady. "I was wondering." He paused, adjusting his glasses like they were buying him time. "Would you maybe want to get dinner sometime?" I stared at him, not because I didn't understand, but because I did. The last time a man had asked me to dinner, I was wearing a nursing bra and hadn't slept in 3 days. John had taken me out to a chain restaurant and spent the evening talking about how tired he was. This was different. Thomas wasn't selling anything. He wasn't rescuing me. He wasn't even flirting, not really. Just offering something small, simple, kind. Still, I almost said no. It rose in my throat out of habit. "No, thank you. I'm fine. I'm busy. I'm something." But then I looked at him, really looked, and I realized I didn't want to be busy. I didn't want to be safe. I didn't want to protect myself so fiercely that I forgot how to accept softness. So I said, "Dinner. Sounds nice." He smiled wider then, not triumphant, just relieved. "There's a little diner down the block, not fancy." "I like not fancy," I said. We agreed on Friday, 7 o'clock. No expectations, no backstory required. That night I stood in front of the motel mirror and looked at myself longer than usual, not to judge, just to witness. I brushed my hair, put on lipstick. Not for him, not even for the date. For the version of me that still believed there were quiet beginnings after loud endings. And as the rain continued outside, I whispered to my reflection, just once, "You don't have to be alone to be free." And then I went. Not to be saved, but to be seen. It wasn't planned. I was walking home from the library, coffee in hand, coat buttoned up to my chin, when I turned the corner and saw them, Leah and her youngest, Henry, outside the bakery. He was taller now, hair longer, cheeks round and pink from the cold. He wore a red jacket that looked one size too big, arms flailing as he chased a pigeon across the sidewalk. Leah stood beside a stroller holding a paper bag, her eyes half on him, half on the phone in her hand. I stopped across the street, just stood there, hidden by a row of parked cars and the soft fog of breath in the air. Henry laughed, loud and sudden. His whole body moved with it, like joy had taken over and didn't ask for permission. It hit me like a wave. That laugh. It was my father's. I hadn't heard it in years, not since he passed. But there it was, pure and free, rising from a little boy who had no idea I existed just 20 feet away. I pressed my hand to my chest. I didn't cry. But my eyes stung the way they do when something inside you tightens without warning. He didn't see me. Neither did Leah. And I didn't step forward, didn't call out, didn't cross the street. Because this moment wasn't about reclaiming anything. It was about remembering. Remembering that I had been part of something once, that parts of me still lived on, even if the world I'd built had chosen to forget my name. I watched him chase another pigeon, watched Leah finally kneel to zip his coat up properly. She looked tired, thinner. But not broken. She was learning. Maybe the hard way. But she was still standing. And Henry, he was laughing again. This time at something invisible, the way children do when the world hasn't taught them to hide their joy. I wanted to bottle that sound, tuck it inside my coat, keep it for nights when I forgot what laughter felt like. Instead, I stayed still, let them finish their moment, let it be theirs. When they turned to leave, walking hand in hand toward the parking lot, I whispered goodbye, not out loud, just in my heart. Goodbye for now, maybe forever. Because love, real love, doesn't always mean returning. Sometimes it just means witnessing from across the street something beautiful that no longer belongs to you, and letting it live anyway. I waited until the sun was low in the sky, when the world felt softer, quieter. I brewed a cup of tea, sat at the little table near the window and pulled out 2 envelopes, one for Ethan, one for Leah. Not drafts this time, not pages meant only for me. These were final. I wrote slowly, carefully, with a kind of gentleness I hadn't known I still had. Not to wound, not to shame, just to say the truth plainly, the way truth deserves to be spoken. To Ethan I wrote, "I raised you with every ounce of love I had, even when you didn't see it. I was there when no one else was. I forgave things you never even knew hurt me. But forgiveness doesn't mean return. It doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. It means I've released the weight, but I won't carry it again. You have your life. I have mine now." To Leah I wrote, "I see you, Leah. I know you're trying. I know the road you're on, because I walked it too. Without help. Without applause. I hope you find your footing. I hope you find your peace. But I can't come back to where I vanished. That door is closed, not in anger, but in necessity. I still love you, but I love myself now too. I didn't write long letters. I didn't recount the past or demand understanding. I just gave them the boundary they never thought I'd have the courage to draw. Then I signed each one simply. Margaret. Not Mom, not love, always. Just the name I chose, the one I reclaimed. I sealed the envelopes. Pressed the stamps down like punctuation. Final. Clear. And the next morning I mailed them. No ceremony, no trembling hands, just a walk to the blue mailbox outside the post office, the sound of the flap closing like a soft exhale. I stood there for a moment after, eyes on the street, feeling the wind catch the edge of my coat. They would read those letters, maybe cry, maybe rage, maybe ignore them altogether. But I wouldn't know, because this time I wasn't waiting for a reply. Forgiveness isn't an invitation. It's a release. And I had spent too many years holding open doors for people who never knocked again. I forgave them, but I didn't return, because healing didn't live back there. It lived right here, in the quiet that followed, in the peace I chose. The cottage was smaller than anything I'd ever lived in, one bedroom, sloped roof, windows that creaked when the wind shifted. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew it was mine. Not legally, not yet, but spiritually. The walls didn't hold anyone's memories but mine. No photos of children who stopped calling, no dents in the door from slammed fists or feet, no hidden corners filled with the dust of being unappreciated. Just space. Space to exhale. Space to begin. It sat near the edge of a lake, still and wide, like a secret being kept between the trees. On most mornings, the surface looked like glass, broken only by the ripple of a duck or the slow stretch of mist lifting from the water. I bought the place with money from the house I left behind, not a palace, but enough. More than enough. I didn't want grandeur. I wanted truth. And truth doesn't need square footage. I spent my first few nights there sleeping with the window cracked open, letting the sound of wind move through the screen. It whispered in ways people never could. Never once did it ask me to explain myself. I furnished the place with care. A second-hand armchair by the window, a chipped ceramic lamp that glowed soft in the evenings, shelves for my books, a kettle for tea, a porch swing that didn't need conversation to make the time feel full. I didn't hang any family pictures, not because I was bitter, but because this chapter wasn't about looking back. It was about looking inward. Sometimes I sat by the lake with a blanket around my shoulders and just listened. Not to music, not to news, just to the rustle of leaves, the low call of geese, the creak of dockwood settling in the sun. It filled the spaces that used to ache. People say home is where the heart is, but I think they get that wrong. Home is where the noise stops, where you stop performing, where your own name doesn't echo like a stranger's. This cottage with its drafty windows and stubborn lock became the place where I remembered I didn't need to be chosen. I just needed to choose myself. And in that choosing, I found something I hadn't known was missing. Stillness. Not silence from being dismissed, but stillness from being safe. My real home was never a house full of people, it was this. A place where the sound of wind replaced apology. And finally, I could breathe. I hadn't worn the ring in years. Not since John left, not really. It had lived in the back of a drawer, buried beneath loose buttons, old receipts, and a key. I never remembered what it opened. I used to think I was saving it. For what? I don't know. Maybe a moment of clarity, maybe closure, maybe just the courage to let it go. It was a simple gold band, no diamonds, no inscription, just a circle, unbroken, untarnished, and heavier than it had any right to be. I held it in my palm that morning as I sat on the dock behind the cottage. The lake was calm, mirror-like, the sky pale with early light. Birds moved somewhere in the distance, too far to see, but close enough to hear. I rolled the ring between my fingers, thumb grazing the edge that once pressed against my skin. It didn't hurt to hold it. Not anymore. But it didn't belong there either. It wasn't about John. Not really. I'd let go of him long ago. Long before the divorce papers. Long before Diane and almond flour cookies and his new life that didn't have room for the woman who kept the house running while he found himself. No, this wasn't about him. This was about me. About the version of me that wore that ring like a badge of honor, and then like a chain. The version who swallowed her voice, kept the peace, filled every silence with apology and every space with service. I stood at the edge of the dock, closed my fingers around the band, and I said, softly, but out loud, "Thank you for what you taught me." And goodbye. Then I opened my hand, let the ring fall. It hit the water with barely a sound, just a soft plunk, and then it was gone. No splash, no ripple, just gone. And in its absence, something opened in my chest, like a breath I'd been holding for decades finally released. I stood there for a long time watching the spot where it disappeared. I didn't cry. I didn't feel empty. I felt light. Not because I'd rid myself of the past, but because I'd honored it and stepped beyond it. I walked back up the hill barefoot, the dew on the grass kissing my toes, the morning sun breaking over the trees, and for the first time in my life, I realized letting go isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just the sound of a gold ring slipping into water, and a woman finally deciding to come back to herself. I used to imagine them finding me, showing up at the motel with flowers or tears or both, telling me they finally understood, that they missed me, that they were sorry, but they never came. And now, I'm glad they didn't. Because disappearing was never about them. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't some dramatic gesture meant to teach a lesson or win their love back. It was rescue. I rescued myself. From the noise, from the invisibility, from the slow erosion of being needed but never nurtured. People talk about freedom like it's a shout, a flag in the air. But for me, it was quieter, softer. It was an empty room that didn't expect anything of me. A cup of tea I poured only for myself, a walk without a destination, a life where my name wasn't Mom or wife or "Are you almost done?" It was just Margaret, Margaret Green. I started telling people that name like it had always belonged to me, and in a way, maybe it had, even when I wasn't using it, even when I forgot it. Now I say it without hesitation. I write it at the bottom of postcards I never send. I sign it on garden club forms. I smile when someone says it aloud and it doesn't echo with history. It just sounds like me. Sometimes when I sit on the dock behind the cottage and watch the wind move across the lake, I wonder if they still talk about me. If they still check the mailbox hoping. If they scroll through old photos and notice the shape I left behind. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. It doesn't matter. I didn't need to be missed. I needed to be free. And the truth is, I never returned. Not to the house, not to the role, not to the version of myself who begged to be seen. That woman is gone. In her place stands someone they never truly met. Someone who laughs out loud, who reads entire novels without stopping, who plants lavender just because it makes the air smell like hope. Someone who learned that silence isn't loneliness, it's space. And peace is not the absence of pain. It's the absence of pretending. So no, I didn't go back. I didn't knock on their doors. I didn't wait for the apology. Because I found something better than being found by them. I found myself. And sometimes, you have to go missing to finally be found. What part of this story touched you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to read them. If this story felt close to your heart, give it a like, subscribe if you want to be part of a space where real stories matter. Got a couple more minutes? Check out the next story. It's also about the things we rarely say out loud.